My name is Alan Etchane Jackson, and I work here in Master Control as a Master Control Specialist at Vegas PBS. Thank you all so much for being here tonight and for sending your questions in to our amazing panel. We hope that you enjoyed this special screening of Mr. Soul. And to see it again, you can tune into Vegas PBS Channel 10.1 this Monday, February 22nd at 10 p.m. Or you can stream it for free on our website at vegaspbs.org until March 23rd. Now, I'm honored to introduce your host for the evening, Brianna Whiteside. She is an assistant professor at UNLV, teaching African American literature, popular culture, and African American science fiction. Her research areas include African American history, healing justice, Afrofuturism, artificial intelligence, and 20th century Black women's writings. Brianna uses Black documentaries like Mr. Soul in her classes as teaching tools to diversify learning and help students better understand Black history, culture, and thought. Brianna will be the host of the event, relaying the audience questions to the rest of the panel and helping lead the discussion as needed. Brianna?
Thank you, Alan. Next up, we have Nicole Ford. Nicole is the co-owner of Juneteenth 365, a Black women-owned company designed to uplift, educate, inspire, and enrich Black people 365 days a year. Nicole has spent her lifetime as a musician, artist, and in the last 12 years, dedicated much of her life to being a drummer as well as a promoter of African drum, dance, and culture through her work with several different cultural organizations. She knows life as a Black artist as well as life behind the scenes as a producer and businesswoman in the industry, and is excited about the revolutionary work of Mr. Ellis Hazlip. Our next panelist is Lance Smith, who is a multidisciplinary artist, illustrator, and teacher based in Las Vegas, Nevada. His work often explores themes of loss, distortion, and liberatory practices. Lance is the artist manager of the Rogers Art Loft, and he has been featured in multiple local and national group exhibitions, as well as solo exhibitions past and forthcoming. He emphasizes the importance of acknowledging one's intuition as a tool for artistic expression. And last but not least, we have Soni Brown, who is a freelance journalist who focused on socio-political news features, food, and travel. She started writing at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, while studying culinary arts. She later earned her journalism degree at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. She mentions that she was reminded of how much optimism is infused in Black life. Every day we wake up and choose life and living. It is in the living of lives that we build country, community, and culture. And she mentions of soul that watching Hazlip investigate Black life with genuine care and tenderness makes her hyper aware of the deep well of love we have for each other. And of course, we have Alan Etchane Jackson as our other panelists. So welcome to our panelists and our guests watching at home. I'm super excited to talk about Mr. Soul this evening, and I know you all are as well. Don't forget to drop your questions in the chat so that we can answer them. We're super excited to answer them. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into a discussion of soul. I want to start with a quote that came from the documentary to help frame the context of what we'll be talking about. And this is from Ellis Hazlip, and he says, "The primary purpose of soul is neither to educate or to entertain, but to give people a chance to share in the Black experience. The show must do that first, then it can educate and entertain. Soul makes Blacks visible in a society where they've been largely invisible." So to my panelists, I'm wondering, can you tell us a bit about your experience or aha moments while watching Soul? Anyone can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I would say that my experience watching Soul is that I grew up being a lover of R&B music, and to see all of those artists opening up with Patti LaBelle with Somewhere Over the Rainbow just gave me chills. And to be able to have a platform like that with the type of music that I grew up on, that I love, but then have the political consciousness as well, to have all the activists that he had on the stage and all the poets I felt like that was a huge aha moment for me of something that I feel like we maybe lost once Soul was off the air.
Okay, I'll go next. One of the many of the aha moments, the one in particular was the aha moment of the connectivity between LGBTQIA people and Black liberation movements. You know, being able to see how we were able to connect in spite of. I think that was something that was really encouraging to me to see in the film. And also, for me, just makes me hope that in the future that we can have some more of that connectivity between the current, Black liberation movements and the LGBTQIA community. So that was one of my aha moments.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see all the different flavors of Black folks just being on camera, giving their viewpoints. I mean, you had Mama Africa, Miriam Makeba, you had Patti LaBelle, you had all these different artists and thinkers on a television program just really kind of embracing Black life in all its many different forms, and unabashedly so, being very proud and just being themselves. It's wonderful.
I was particularly interested in how Soul reimagined Black existence on the American landscape, and how it not only affirmed Black existence, but it gave voice to diverse experiences of Black people. So I really appreciated that aspect of the documentary.
Yeah, what really struck me and was the thing that made hairs stand up on my arm, that aha thing for me, was the fact that we saw even in the promo reel where they were running off these names: Patti LaBelle, Earth, Wind and Fire, Stevie Wonder, James Baldwin, Stokely Carmichael, so on and so forth, was okay. Everyone that was in that promo, they are household names and they are part of the Black experience. If you grew up in a Black home with a Black family, these names and their contributions are major parts of your life and your upbringing. However, when the show was currently on the air, when it was happening, the thing for me was when they introduced LaBelle and they said Patricia Holt, and who? But that's right. It was Patty's government. I thought her name was LaBelle, Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, right? So the thing of it was that, again, these people were in an embryonic stage, or beginning stages of what would become their legacy and their legendary, monumental, world-changing careers in most of their cases. Seeing them in a raw and yet undiscovered, yet unfulfilled state. Again, one of the co-hosts, hey, wait a minute, I know that lady. That's Susan from Sesame Street. That they went on from that point, the fact that they were all in this cauldron together, but that each individual cog on that wheel went on to establish something bigger, greater than even than that, what would have been realized at that point. I believe one of the actresses that did spoken word in there, Anna Maria Horsford, that name didn't become more well known until she was on a sitcom in Amen, and then she became Craig's mom in Friday, and then so it's like, oh, they were doing stuff way back then. So seeing the origins, if you will, the humble origins of these legendary, amazing people, that was something that's that my mind is still blown. So
absolutely. We have a comment in the chat and it says, yes, it was amazing to see our history all over again. Reminded me of what I saw every day in the streets of Philadelphia growing up. So before we jump to our discussion, we do have a question that I want us to address. And it says, given the countless venues for community as well as self-presentation these days, what do you think are the most viable places to showcase African-American art and culture? Are there perhaps too many contradictory spaces for showing our art and culture, not to mention the politics of presentation? Or do we run the risk of doing harm to our community by some of the individual presentations? Anybody can take a stab at it.
So I'll say that what I think about it is that I feel, are used to just getting crumbs and having one single voice for a certain thing. We're not used to necessarily having a Taco Bell on one corner, McDonald's on another corner, and several different brands of loaves of bread. Like, we're just not used to the diversity of having all of our voices being heard. And so I feel like there's a space for everybody, because everybody is not called to do the same thing. Your purpose is your purpose, and you'll find a group of like-minded people, and we should be able to share who we are. The beauty of soul is that they show the diversity of Black people. And it would be a shame if we thought, well, you know what, it should all be gospel, or it should all be modern dance, or it should all be spoken word. Like, no, we should be able to express our voices and find our tribe no matter where we go, and not try to limit ourselves to, you know, one messiah or one leader or one thing. So that would be my opinion.
I would like to add to that. I think also the idea of, in many ways, like especially when entertainment, art, movement spaces, we think in sometimes like a scarcity mindset, right? And I understand that, like you said, Nicole, there truly is room for all of us. And I think in regards to showing, I think a lot of it is just showing up and applying, right? And even though there will be many no's, right? I think it's all about some of your own personal consistency as a creative. And then if you find that spaces are not wavering for you, then like Nicole just said as well, go to find the spaces that are supporting you, right? I think it's all about building up your craft and being willing to create in spite of, right? And always being ready to show up. And I think that just through that consistency, right? And knowing that you are not just the only person, because we don't look to white artists or the predominant culture, and each of them as, you know, they are the, you know, the monolith of their race, right? And that's something that happens to us as creatives. So I think also just being aware of that trap, period, and kind of sidestepping it a little. And I understand that sometimes you have to adjust and continue to, you know, kind of play the game until you can find your way in, if that makes sense. But always know that your work and you are worth it, and never stop.
Absolutely. We're not gatekeepers for anyone's thought or expression, or the need to just like be out there creating something in the world. If you are Black and you want to do something that I wouldn't necessarily do, then that's your business. You know, as Tabitha says, it's your business. You can do it. I'm okay with it. There's lots of room for us. Every one of us can express ourselves however we want, when we want. And I honestly can't imagine that it's going to detract from the race. You know, like, thankfully, we can all be individuals as well as part of the Black community.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Soul models how we can present our voices in a variety of ways. I don't think that everyone agreed with every performance. Everyone agreed with every artistic expression, but it shows that there is a place for everyone on this platform. And I think that is the magic of Mr. Soul, right? That we can celebrate and not agree, right? So let's go ahead and jump to one of our questions. I'm super excited to hear your thoughts, because I'm thinking about the future generations, and I'm thinking about where do we go, right? And so Questlove asks in the documentary, how different would our lives have been if Mr. Soul had a 20-year run? I like to pose that question to you all. How different would our lives have been? Because I see Soul as a tool that could have been used to provide communal access and to wholeness, build Black social capital, and foster positive and collective self-efficacy. So what do you all think?
I think about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and how years after that, you know, he's been on the air, years after his death, people still like have this really special place in their heart for that show and for him as a person. And I have to say, like, imagine if you had like 20 years, 20 seasons of this that was easily accessible, readily available whenever, on PBS or wherever, just on any streaming service, what that would have done for little gay kids, for little awkward kids, for all the in-between that we don't quite fit the mold, the creative kids, the weirdo kids, whatever, what it would have been like to just see themselves represented on TV, and represented well on TV, right? In the privacy of their home, and being able to identify with that. I think that would have taken us years, leaps, and just years ahead of where we are right now in terms of self-identity and being proud of who we are, not in connection to whiteness. right? Just being cemented who we are.
Yeah. To coincide with what Soni said, when you're able to see yourself in something and kind of get that sense, that notion that, oh, it's okay to be creative in this way. Because I'm sure there are kids who didn't know that they could actually get into dance theater until they saw a Black person involved in dance theater. I've had involvement in rock bands in Vegas for like 11 years prior to now. And the thing was, I'd always get that backlash. Oh, you playing that white boy stuff, huh? Well, for me, the actual green light that said, hey, it's okay, was seeing Living Color, the band, when they burst onto the scene, 1988, 89. This is an all Black rock band, and they're taking it, full pedal to the metal, and they're doing it, and it's hey, it's okay. Oh, it's legit. So it's not a novelty. So when they see it in its pure form, and that it's not a novelty, it's not a gimmick, it's something that is real, organic, and tangible. Yeah, it gives, kids don't fly because we told them that they can't. That's the thing. And that if you're able to see it manifested in a physical form, yeah, if you can see it, you can be it, correct?
I would agree with that, and also offer that I feel that what would have been different, at least from my perspective, is that the marrying of the art and the entertainment with the politics and the consciousness is not something, as well as the religion. So the mixture of all of those things, I think if we would have had that for 20 years, we would have been a more unified group of people. And I feel like we also would have not, or we wouldn't be in 2020 repeating the same thing we saw in the beginning of Soul with the police brutality. I can't say that for 100% fact because white supremacy is real, but I just feel like we as a people would have been in a different place had our mind been expanded, because a lot of our slavery is also mental. And I feel like having a show like Soul be on the air for 20 years would expand our consciousness in a way where we would not have been as enslaved as we sometimes can be. So that would be my thought.
Beautiful points were made, and I agree with everyone. I think of, maybe even in some ways kind of more some of the creative projects and some of the beautiful strides that we would have been able to make as individuals, specifically Black Americans, if we had something like Soul On that we can continually go through, right? And thinking of, I think and feel that there would be more freedom in regards to certain types of expression. I feel that we would be in a place where we would be so much more accepting of people of varying experiences. Is kind of a sad thing, but I'm just happy that we're in this space now. And I think that just us having this conversation can really kind of start to bridge that gap, right? And we can pull back, and show the kids that we have now the things that are going on, and show them that they are reflected, right? That you are not left behind, and that you are not new, and that you are not something strange, right? That you are whole, and that you are powerful, and you can see yourself reflected in something like Soul.
Absolutely.
And I love what you all are saying, because when I think about where we're going, I think about the present moment and how we're looking at Afrofuturism as reimagining Black people in the future. I see Afrofuture, I see the roots in Soul, right? We see this techno culture, we see these futuristic beings performing. And I think that had we seen that, then we would have a more global or maybe positive view of what Black people can be in 2020, 2021, and even through 2030, 40, 50. I believe that knowing where we're pulling from now grounds us a bit in the culture and the history, and allows us to go even further into the future, or even imagine ourselves into the future. I believe that there was a quote in the documentary where it's like, we're trying to open this up for future generations, right? We're trying to have this show for the future. And they were doing that. And that was the power of Mr. Soul. And we kind of lost it, or it was buried. Let me not say we lost it. It was buried very intentionally by, the government. Okay, so we are going back to, it disappeared on me. Let's just go to the chat. Here's a question. Why is it that so many of our youth and young adults here in our own community are oblivious to the accomplishments of their ancestors and forefathers? Anybody want to?
It's not by coincidence or by accident. I think it's more by design from my perspective. Again, when we were talking about things earlier before we came online, I discovered a lot of things about Black culture and Black consciousness by stumbling upon one thing and then taking steps to the next thing. If it's there for them to see, like it's really hidden. It's not advertised, and it's not the popular or sexy thing to be in touch with one's roots, to understand one's culture, and to carry the legacy on. We talk about a disconnect with the now generation and folks of a certain age, people in their 20s and people in their 40s. Out in the streets, there's an actual disconnect. There's almost even a silent feud going on when young men see old men. What's up, OG? But it's not a thing of respect. It's almost a thing of disrespect. Like they're mad at someone for being old. And of course, when you get old and you sense this disrespect from the younger generation, it's like, well, that's not by accident. Divide and conquer is always the name of the game. And if young people could see themselves in that history, but it has to be presented to them. But what's being presented and what's being fed to them now. I mean, we're talking a program that was on public television in the late 60s, early 70s. Limited access. I mean, there were only 3-4 channels on all. When you had a television, you only had access to 3 or 4 channels, including public television. Now we're beyond television. We're beyond internet. We're streaming. We're watching stuff on demand. So, but yet and still, they still don't connect to it, and it's readily available. It has to be appealing to them. But you don't have to trick them into reconnecting with their history, with their culture. All they have to do is be exposed to it. I think the exposing of it is the thing, because we get Cardi B and the trap music and all of that. It's readily available everywhere you turn. Is what you can find. But
no, I don't know if I actually agree that our young people aren't exposed to this. And I'm not just saying that because I spend a lot of time watching TikTok. I think it might seem fractured, that they may not necessarily know the heroes of our day, but they certainly know how we got here. They know the tricks that is being played, and they're making demands just like we did, and our fathers and mothers before us made demands of equality and freedom. And moving forward to be seen as full citizens without having to say, here's why I deserve citizenship. Here's why I deserve my life as an American. So I'm not too sure if I'm in complete agreement that our young people aren't aware of their cultural history or their actual history, to be honest with you. My son is 12. And I think he doesn't listen to a word I say, but he can articulate very well why he should have a say in our society, in our lives, and that his life matters just like everybody else's, but his life especially matters. So I have to say my experience with young people is like, maybe their heroes aren't my heroes, but they certainly have their heroes.
right.
I would offer that there's a community center here in Las Vegas called West Las Vegas Art Center. And I know, Etchane, you're familiar with it, and probably everybody on the panel. And if the person who asked the question in the chat is curious about, making a difference in a young person's life, that's one place you can go and connect all day to your roots, to your culture, to everything. They have African drum class, dance class, all kind of modern dance, tap, everything there, and programs there. And it's very reasonable. Usually a lot of their shows are free. There's also the library over there as well, and the theater. So sometimes it's also up to us. I don't have kids, so forgive me if I'm saying this, but it's up to the parents to actually, find these types of programs and teach their children these things, because otherwise they're just going to go for, like you said, the Cardi B's or whatever's popular in the mainstream. You have to be going outside of the box to find these things sometimes. So anyway, West Las Vegas Arts Center, that's the place to be for children and adults too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Allow me to follow up on that. This culture, art, music, dance, poetry, all of it is food for the soul, right? But in the real world, we can find McDonald's without even trying. We throw a rock, there's a McDonald's on every corner, right? There's a Taco Bell on every corner. But establishments that might be a little better for the body, like say a Boston Market or a soup and salad or a sweet tomatoes, not that easy to find. So sometimes it's what's readily available, but what's also accessible. And I think people go for what is familiar and what's comfortable. And sometimes connected to your culture, if you're unaware of what it is, if it's being presented to you for the first time, it can be kind of uncomfortable. Well, wait a minute, what is this? I thought we were all one thing. I thought we were all this. So you're presented with this diaspora of a different view of the culture. It can be kind of hard to get into. But then again, the culture is where you find it.
Yeah, building on Alan, what you were saying, I think we also need to address the systemic positioning of things, but also whitewashing and erasure, right? And I want to talk about this in terms of education and how sometimes Black students are not introduced to Black leaders or Black literature or the Black African American canon until college. And even at that point, it's an elective. It's not a general education requirement, right? So you get to elect if you learn about African American history and culture. And so I think largely when I'm thinking about history classes in elementary school, middle school, they're teaching different things, especially as it relates to enslavement. And the languaging around enslavement is evolving, not in a good way, to remove slaves and to present that they were willing participants, right? And so we're dealing with a larger erasure culture of Black history and the importance of Black leaders. And we can tie that back into why Soul did not continue to air on PBS, right? Or why we did have Soul Train, which was phenomenal, but we didn't have Soul, which was educational. Right. And so what you were getting at with the food, you were talking about food deserts, really. Right. Well, you can get the quick, fast food, but if you want healthy, whole foods or organic foods, they're not in Black communities. And that is a systemic issue. So we have to kind of take a broader scope, not just maybe look at the children, but look at the politics that are influencing what's in front of them. Right.
What's made available.
Mm-hmm. All right, y'all, let's keep this show rolling. Let's talk about poetry. And so at Hazlitt's recommendation, Nikki Giovanni, one of the most prominent Black women poets of the Black arts movement, recorded "The Truth is on Its Way," in which Giovanni recited her poetry to a gospel music track by the New York City Community Choir, which signals that the secular and the sacred rise together in African American culture. Giovanni says, it wasn't called spoken word then. If it had been spoken word, I would have won a Grammy, which I agree with. Being a published poet, why do you think Giovanni says that? Or what's the difference between poetry and the spoken word? And the reason why I'm asking this is because I'm thinking more and more on Amanda Gorman's inaugural performance for President Joe Biden, and the Boston Review's comment on February 16 that says, quote, Amanda Gordon reminded us poetry is meant to be not only read, but heard. So starting today, most poems we publish will include the audio of the author reading their work. right? And so the question to go back is, what is the difference between poetry and a spoken word? Or what is the value of returning to oral traditions to complement the written text?
I think I think a Sankofa, go back and fetch it, right? I think even when we were brought here to this space, to this land, our voices and the way that we orate and the way that we communicate is essential to the way that, that we survive and the way that we thrive. And for me, I know that there are differences, but for me, they feel so similar that they are the same. There may be a separation in tone, there may be a separation in genres of music, but I feel as if there is, for me, when I can see, someone that's spoken word, someone that's considered a poet, I fuse them together, right? Because I think it all is coming from our collective, right? Our collective struggle, our collective thought, our collective wish to be in a space that sees us as full human beings still to this day. So that is how I feel about it.
I concur. I agree wholeheartedly. Poetry and spoken word, we're really talking about defining terms, and when you want to define these things, these forms of expression, it's more or less putting them in a box or putting them in a nice neat lane so we can better understand it. But the truth is, not all spoken word is poetic. Not all spoken word is poetry. Richard Pryor is a spoken word artist. However, his comedy in itself has a poetic energy to it. So it's really about the concept and how it's grasped. And what you just read, saying that spoken word not only will be seen but now heard. Well, if it's being seen and it's being heard, it has a much better chance of being felt, and that is the point of spoken word and poetry. When that expression, that some people can read the poem off the page, but they won't get the inflections, they won't get the emotion, the delivery, the cadence that the author is trying to convey. When they hear it, and they're able to, it's when someone breathes life into these words on a page, it is delivered much better. It's just like teaching tools, right? When kids are studying out of the textbook, you might grasp a little bit, but if they have a video presentation of what's going on, say it's science class or history, they have a better grasp of it. Now, when there's an in-class activity where they're actually involved in it, yeah, they're going to take it with them forever. So it's all about that, the way it's delivered and the way it's received.
I always imagine spoken word as something that you pay on Friday night to feel, and then on Saturday morning you read to think. And the oral tradition has always been important for us as a people, regardless of where we are in the world. I mean, I'm from Jamaica, and I know all my Nancy stories, right? I remember all those stories being told, and all the stories of my mother telling me, like, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, just going all the way back, and it's just been passed on through that tradition. It's extremely important for us. I mean, there's a reason why rap music is big for us.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, really, because I've been a drummer, African drummer, and so the beat has always been a big part of my life. I did tap dance, I did all these things, and rhythm has always been a huge part of my life, which of course, now I know comes from my roots in Africa and everything else. But I'm just curious to know how we have taken the spoken word and put it to a beat, and then use that to also weaponize us in the Black community with certain kinds of lyrics that we use in our music. And I was just kind of curious, because I know, Alan, you said that you were a rapper. What you thought about that?
Well, it's again, back to the food analogy, it's food for the soul. And of course, there are things that we eat that taste good to us that are not good for us. Then there's other things that we eat where the taste may not be all of that appealing to the palate, but it does wonders for the body. And, it's funny because all of these forms of expression, they all carry some type of message. Even in the R&B, when people think of R&B, they think of singing and romance, but there's so much content and so much of a message, so much of a spirit that's conveyed through it, sometimes without even directly sending a message across, without directly saying, hey, you need to unify and come together. And that's where the poetry comes in, is where these words are curated and they're delivered in such a way that when that one receives it, they get the message, but they get it here. They're not taking it in as a literal, message. You should learn to get out and vote. You should always respect yourself. It's given in doses. Like when your grandmama breaks up your medicine in your soup, breaks up the pill in your cornbread, and you're able to ingest it. It's because, like I said, a lot of times when you try to give the message directly, people are going to shy away from it. Being taught, there's a humility in learning, because you have to admit that you didn't know something before, or that something was lost to you, and that you have to humble oneself and accept this new knowledge or this new information and process it to become better. So when you always get those kids who are bad patients. Here, take your medicine. Don't want it. It's going to make you feel better. I don't want it. But you have to take your medicine. So, that's what a lot of this stuff is, food for the soul.
I feel what you're saying also is that it's subliminal, almost like a commercial jingle where they plant that music to a commercial, and then all of a sudden you don't even know why you're buying that brand, but you're just doing it. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I like to also offer that I think the value of it is repositioning the oral traditions of African Americans. We know that African Americans have always learned. It wasn't just reading though and writing, it was orality, it was verbal or partly verbal gestures, it was the learning from people in your community. And so I think what's happening is that we are positioning, right, communal literacies alongside institutional literacies, which in a way rehumanizes the ways in which Black people communicate, right? For so long, we have privileged institutional learning, book writing, book reading, things of that nature. But African Americans, what I find in history and culture, have created community and learning inside of those communities, right? Telling stories, telling jokes, trading the dozens, things of that nature, things that make us lively, which is why I find Giovanni's poetry overlay on top of the gospel, the spoken word, because you can feel it. And it gives you that sense of being in church and that sense of amen, right? That amen corner. And I think that is a part of Black expression that has been lost as a result of privileging the written word over the spoken word, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it can come back to some issues of politic, right? Of certain kinds of Black people needing to get forward. You have to literally rescind all of this, the versions of yourself, this unlearned Black version of yourself for this more upright, learned version. And going back to what you said, Brianna, about Nikki Giovanni with the choir, it is really just saying that we are all of those things at the same time, right? You talk about the secular and the holy, right? Like the one literally comes from the other, and that we have to, it's like imperative for you to understand that you have to literally, you can't cut it all off, right? It doesn't matter. Like these things are from you. Hence the reason why, when many people were brought here as slaves, they took the drums, right? The music, the sound, right? The ring shout, there is this connectivity. We talked earlier about literally being able to feel something in your body, right? When you go into a holy space, right? When two or more are gathered, like we're all gathered, and so it's that is where the true power is understanding that, there's a reason why our musicality, we talk about Afrofuturism, like we are the future, period. Like everything that you get from us, period. So you are where we come from. You can try and shake it, baby, but if we're here, right? And that's the reason why something like soul, Mr. Soul specifically, like being able to see all these iterations of Blackness, right? We talked about Afrofuturism, and you see yourself reflected in this multifaceted way. So it doesn't make you shrink, it makes you expand, right? And I think that's the one thing that I'm seeing in some ways when we're having conversations like this. Alan talked about, sitting straight up after seeing this work, right? And it's like, that is the power, right? Is going back and doing that research, right? And finding it with a level of kindness. I think that's one of the things too, like kindness to the fact that you're just now coming upon this. And yes, we got all kinds of work to do, but use this as the battery pack that's going to help you get to whatever is next, right? Your next episode, your next writing, right? Yeah.
All right, everyone, if you're still with us, be sure to continue to send us your questions. We would love to answer them and engage with you through this session, okay? So I have another question for the panel. So we're going to talk about representation in film. So representation in film, television, and other media not only addresses a fundamental need for identity affirmation, but also provides a vision and opportunities for upward mobility for BIPOC women and LGBTQIA plus persons where they didn't exist or were hindered by stereotypes created in writing rooms. What does the Mr. Soul film tell us about the state of Black representation and authorship in film and television today? And why is it important for Black people, for all people of color, really, to tell their own stories? And I'm especially thinking along the lines of the historical and present day weaponization of media against Black people.
I think for me, it speaks to with any minority group, right? Like Black women, Black queer people, Black people of disabilities, Black people of different abilities, right? We are there, right? And I think seeing something like this film really, again, affirmed for me that we have always been there. If you go through the history, you can find us as well, right? I'm a non-binary person. You can find two-spirit people, right? You can find that there are people that float in this in between. And I think something like Mr. Soul, and if something like this was around in its fullness, right, for all these years that we didn't really get, we could see ourselves reflected and find ways to connect again, right?
I would also add to that what I felt is that, there's power in seeing people who are different and come from different walks of life. And what we see a lot of times is a singular story in the media about who we are as a people in terms of stereotypes. And so if I go to the movies, I can see all kinds of different stories of white people being superheroes, being a family, going on vacation, doing all kinds of things, like, killing people. Like, it could be anything, but it's a whole myriad of stories when it comes to white people. But when it comes to Black people, if we don't tell our own stories, I think that we lose the empathy and our humanity in the fact that we're not sharing the totality of who we are as human beings. And so I feel like, I can go to a white movie and then sit there and feel sad and empathy for the lady who lost her husband and all those things. But if we don't have the same kind of breadth of stories that Black people experience, because we're humans too, I think that that's where we have this weaponization of the media and our dehumanization, and what allows people to go, why are you playing the race card? Like, and all these different things that they say to dismiss us because we're not seen as human beings. And it's based on the power of the media.
That's true. And to coincide with what's being said, if you look at rap music, when NWA emerged, right, and they had the F the Police song, that was a hard political statement, social statement, social commentary. And it was everybody, even if older people were offended by the language of the record, they still felt that sentiment. They've either they personally or someone they know has felt that baton or lost a loved one to police brutality. So they can understand the spirit of that record. Now, NWA being blamed for the total demise of the message of hip hop, or somehow how hip hop's positivity got derailed, I wouldn't necessarily blame it on the group. I would blame it on the concentration of the promotion of that, the sensationalism around that, because these were basically action movies on record. A big rationale at the time when it was discussed, are the rap lyrics going too far? Is it this? Is it that? They would talk about, okay, Schwarzenegger can kill 100 cops in a movie, right? But they're talking about taking their rightful retribution on one in a record, and now it is a problem. Well, you take that spirit of rebellion, and now everybody's pointing the guns at each other instead of their common enemy. That's where it gets derailed, where it becomes weaponized against us. I mean, we went, and it's not to knock Cardi B's and Megan Thee Stallions of the world, because there's always been explicit and provocative content in all forms of music. You know, I'm a child of the 70s. My parents had Millie Jackson records. If y'all know about Millie Jackson, y'all know, right? And I mean, even in generations before, there's always been that provocative thing, but there was always a time and a place for it. And I believe somewhere in along the way, late 80s, early 90s, and into the new millennium, these subgenres of music that had their place, all of a sudden the lines were blurred and the lines were crossed. You know, Josephine Baker was known to be sexually provocative in her acts, but it had its place. Now it's filtered into the Disney timeline. It's filtered into the everyday thing where everyone is accessible to it. I think that's where the big backlash is coming from, because people like to laugh at the dirty jokes and whatnot. But it even in those stand-up comics of their day, Richard Pryor, Red Fox, you name it, Dick Gregory, on down the line, they had explicit language, but there was a message being conveyed. There were viewpoints there that were valid and solid, and they resonated. That's why they were so great. It wasn't just, the curse word wasn't the crux of the joke. The curse word isn't the crux of the record. And it's when you allow that sensationalism, the machine of sensationalism, to kind of curate that and mold it and present it to us as, hey, all you're going to get is dirty words, then you've lost content, you've lost the layers of everything that's in there.
I think as a storyteller, I'm very invested in telling my own story and my own people's story, right? So I think of something of like the Green Book, that movie, how it was just so skewed, and like I had no interest in learning about the driver. I didn't care. It was just like a simpleton's life. Congratulations. There's nothing interesting about that. What was interesting was the man in the back. He was the interesting part. I don't care about you discovering that he's a human with flaws and all these different things. And so, like, when I think of how we tell our stories, or how other people tell their stories, I'm thinking of how small the imagination can be, because we have big problems, right? And we need people who are rooted in the community, who can actually explore these problems on many different levels to find solutions to them. And it can range from a small thing, like just talking about someone who has even like drug addiction. How do we talk about it? How do we present it in media, right? It's always this drug fiend. You never get to see someone who's a drug addict go through, like, just go get a job and come home and have an addiction. But you get to see that in white media, right? It's presented as an illness, as opposed to like it's a personal like problem. And so as a storyteller, there's so many stories that we have out there, and we're rich and diverse in our stories. And I want to be the one who takes the time to tell that story. I don't want to get it from the viewpoint of the chauffeur.
I completely love those statements. I would just like to add that the importance of Black people telling their own stories is because Black stories have been told by others for a very long time. And when we have the tools in our hands to tell our own stories, then we can form counter narratives that challenge the master narrative of what Black people are, which is what Soul did. And I'm really thinking about the 1900s film Birth of a Nation and what that did to revitalize the KKK, but also demonize Black men, right? And present them as sexual predators and things of that nature. And so I think we did need the remake of Birth of a Nation, but also we needed these other films that challenged that master narrative that created the stereotypes, right, during Jim Crow, right, of the mammy figure, right, or the Jezebel, or the lazy Black man, the coon, the tragic mulatto, all of these things that were created post-enslavement. Having the tools in our hands now, we're able to create new stories that actually reimagines or challenges those narratives that we have been told, consumed, and believed subconsciously.
You struck a very poignant point there with bringing up Birth of a Nation, because how long ago was that movie? That was the first Oscar, right? That was the first movie to win an Oscar, if I'm not mistaken. So from that point on, the power of these stories that are told from whatever perspective, when it hits the big screen and it's consumed, yeah, it has an impact on whoever's viewing it. The impact, it varies, but an impact is had nonetheless. So I'll take you folks back just a couple of years when Black Panther premiered in the theaters, right? It was a grand event. Black people came out in regalia, cosplay for the first time. A lot of people were seeing themselves in the pantheon of being a superhero for the first time ever. And there was a backlash. Oh, Black people getting so excited. Oh, blah, blah. Well, yeah, if you're empowered by what you see, right? Because they have movies like Rocky. Everybody goes out and believes they can fight. You have movies like Pumping Iron. Everybody goes out to the gym. You know, you have movies like what's the one with Tom Cruise and the Air Force, Top Gun? People join the Air Force. And so if Black people are so empowered and so enthusiastic and enthralled by what's coming across that screen in just one movie, imagine the impact of what's been happening with white folks with 100 years of Hollywood and everything that we've been subjected to from Birth of a Nation on down. You know, there's a lot of amping up and ramping up of spirits and feelings from the big screen.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to take us to a question we have in the chat. And it says that Las Vegas is considered the entertainment capital of the world. With that being said, what are some suggestions that you offer for us to have more unity in educating, empowering each other, and providing information without the spirit of competition, but for the betterment of our community as a whole?
Good question.
I think
well, I could say one of the things that I use is some of the Black Facebook groups where information is shared about Black-owned businesses, Black events going on, that kind of thing. That has been a blessing to me. There's people who put out Go Urban Vegas puts out lists of, you know, Black lawyers, Black barbershops, Black, you know, businesses, nail salons, all of these different things. And, you know, I think if we find ways to commune that way, yeah, okay, sometimes the groups can get a little petty on some of the stuff that they talk about, but to try to get to the greater goal, I think that that's a great way to connect with other Black people and create unity in the community. Sorry.
I would just add, sorry, Lance.
Right.
I would just add that we need to keep making sure that the West Side rises again. You know, not that it went anywhere, but like put our money where our entertainment eyes want to go, and head to the West Side, the cultural corridor, and look at some of the amazing things that people are doing over there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think also being able to find that connectivity between people who are doing things that you're doing, right, and also being able to, in some ways, kind of put some of your grievances to the side, right, for the sake of connectivity, right, not to the sake of being abused, no shade, you know what I mean? Like if you're in a space where someone doesn't believe in, you know, who you are as an individual, leave, please. But I mean, like just coming into these spaces with a level of yearning and wanting to connect, right? And sometimes just kind of being quiet, laying back, and just kind of seeing and viewing and figuring out how you can be of assistance. I think that's another thing. I know we always, you know, oftentimes we want to have support, but I feel if we find ways to be of assistance to each other, I feel like more things will kind of grow naturally in that way.
That's true. What I was noticing is that with the availability of such programs, West Las Vegas Arts Center, there's a haven for things to blossom and bloom from that. But and also that question of how can we have this unity, it's more or less a question of humanity and who we are as individuals, and when we come together collectively, it's a thing of checking the ego. I mentioned earlier, learning is about humility, right? Humbling oneself. Well, coming together collectively is about humbling oneself as well. Now, of course, I mean, most of the best or most notable bands in history have broken up. Why? Creative differences. Because these are all these gifted individuals in one sphere that have these huge egos, but they also have vision. And a lot of the time when people they have a similar vision, they're able to go forward. But if somebody strays just a little bit this way, a little bit that way, and it's not the vision that this person has, that person has, sometimes that's where the ego can come in. And a lot of organizations and a lot of venues and outlets for creativity and people to come together, a lot of time it falters because simply people can't get out of their own way with their ego. And I think, you know, we as a people, and because we're all supposed to be working towards a common goal, but my way is the only way to the promised land. No, my way is the only way to the promised land. Well, if you look at the Mr. Soul program, like we were talking about it, you got Ellis sitting there having a discussion, a conversation with Farrakhan, not a confrontation, not a contest, but a conversation, an exchange of ideas and actual communication. And I think that's one of the most powerful images, and in dozens of powerful images within this program. One of those powerful images was when they were shaking hands. So, like, right on, brother. And it was a it was a thing of these men coming together and coming to an understanding, because that's sadly is what has been the demise, whether it's a thing of a movement being co-opted from the outside, a la nixing the funding for this. And that was repeated 20 years later when Reagan cut the funding to music in schools. You'll see the direct correlation. You look at the music from the 70s, 8, 9, 10, sometimes 12-piece bands. You cross over into the 80s, all of those bands had somebody go solo, and the instrumentation was now reduxed, synthesizers, drum machines, and it was cut off. So it's either co-opted or it is a thing of somebody commandeers it from within. And it's really about checking the ego.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to realize whomever asked the question, which was really wonderful, is that you have the power to create. You know, you can create this same space that we have right here in your own home with your friends, right? You can use your social media to create these spaces. So you don't necessarily need a large platform. You can create the change and the entertainment and the things that you like from the comfort of your own home, and it can be content. I think about if you're a millennial or if you're a lot on the internet, Kev on Stage, right? If you watch him, he just did all these jokes, and now he's a well-known comedian and artist and things of that nature, but it was at home using social media, right? So use the people who you have access to. You can host a movie night where you watch Black films and have a discussion. You can stream it if you like, or you could not, or you can partner with some of the organizations that were mentioned here tonight. And you can see if you can create some type of event that can be catered to your community as well as the local organization's community as a whole. I think we do not have to do things in isolation, but we can do them better if we do them in community with one another, because we all bring different strengths. As you can see represented in this panel tonight, we're all from diverse backgrounds and areas of study, and we've come together to discuss a film. So I want you to remember that you have the power to create the things, the entertainment, or whatever it is that you want. You can do that right now on your own terms. All right, y'all, let's go to the last question. Soni, you have something?
I was just saying, and support Black writers.
And support Black writers, yes. All right, let's go to our call to action question, okay? At the end of the film, during the last episode of Soul, Hazlitt says, although it's over, it's not the end. Black seeds keep on growing. These words came from a telegram sent to Hazlitt by Patti LaBelle to commemorate the last show and encourage her friend not to despair, that the conversation was not over, it had just begun. How did the Soul series plant seeds for the future? And what is your advice or call to action for those watching?
I would say don't live in fear. Understand that you're far more powerful than you understand. Understand that you have many people, right, both living and not living, passed on, that are behind you that are here to push you, right? And seeing something like Soul, right, I'm invigorated, I'm encouraged. I feel seen, and I also feel connected, right? To oftentimes even communities that I didn't even feel connected to in my waking life, right? See that connectivity is there, right? To see that these sparks and these connections have always been made, and that it's just up to us, right? Like Brianna says, to start that thing back up, right? Light that candle, right? My call to action would be for anyone in the sound of my voice to know that you are protected and you are loved, and you have a right to be yourself in its fullness, right? In all of its fullness, right? And just seek out those who wish to help you, and just look for love in any way you can.
The thing that we can take from Mr. Soul from this documentary is that what I marvel at is the power that was contained within that series in those 5 years, the amount of power that was generated, the amount of power that was displayed by the unity, and by accepting the ideas, and by allowing all of the spokes on the wheel to have a turn in that cycle, that revolution, that their progression. Take the spirit of that and manifest it today, because honestly, I don't think something of that magnitude can be recreated as it was then, in that pure and raw form. As we saw, we saw all the names that were in the promo, and all the people that we noted in the course of that whole program. It was much more powerful than the sum of its parts. So going back to Brianna's advice, to start it right where you are, with what you got right now. The Poets Corner has been the longest running spoken word venue in Las Vegas, and every conclusion of every session, the word was, hey, don't stop here. Start it in your home. Find another coffee shop, get a couple of people together. It doesn't have to be a million seller to make an impact. It doesn't have to pull in a million people to make an impact. That theory of each one teach one is infallible. You take it and you light a candle. All it takes is one candle to light another. So it starts there. It's very simple, a very simplistic thing. And once you are able to understand that you don't have to climb Mount Everest just to take steps forward, and start where you are and work with what you got, basically, and you can amaze yourself.
Yeah, it's a beautiful feeling, that whole idea of Black seeds keep on growing. And I think for me, I want to continue to try and find those people who are new in their careers, or just Black people doing things on their own, like La Femme Deuce, the Cotillion Society, sending young girls to college, or even like the fraternity of Black skiers, who help young Black kids to learn how to ski, and take them all over in Colorado and Utah just to ski and have fun in the snow. I think it's really important that we find the people in our community right here in Las Vegas doing things, and embrace them and encourage them in it and help them to grow.
So I would add to that. I guess this might be a little shameless self-promotion, but for a call to action, I invite you all to go to my website, which is www.nicoledford.com. D as in drummer, dancer, delicious, all of those things. And the reason why is because I feel like I have been a continuation of Mr. Soul. I have been one of those seeds for the last 12 years. I have been a drummer, a performer, but I've also been a promoter of African drums and dance and culture. And I've done that work through various organizations: Africa Love Store, the African Village, Vozolo Dance Company, Olabisi African Drum and Dance, like so many different organizations. And I'm going to be making sure that I keep my website up to date of everything that's coming up and going on. And with my company, Juneteenth 365, shout out to the ladies who are on the screening today, my co-owners, we are going to bring Black culture to the community, but not just Black culture, but Black commerce as well. It was ironic that Vegas PBS contacted me because we have a spoken word event coming up next Friday and Saturday at a store called African Traditions. And if you're looking for a community, African Traditions is a great place to find community. She has sister circles, yoni steaming. Well, that's one of the things she did. She has lectures. It's all about Black pride there. She has Black products, Black books, Black jewelry, clothing, everything. And African Love Store has that too in Town Square. Anyway, my point is that your call to action is to go to my website and see all the things that are available out there in the community. It's not really to plug myself, but it's to go and see what we have going on. So Juneteenth 365 has a spoken word poetry cipher coming up at African Traditions next Friday and Saturday. You can go to my website to get tickets. And we'll also be having a grand opening of Ashe Healing House, which is going to be an amazing space for Black crystals, sound healing, massage therapy, Reiki, all of those things that we need in the Black community as well. And that's going to be in March. And just keep following us because we got a lot going on. So that's my shameless plug. But I feel like Mr. Soul touched my soul, and I'm a walking Ellis Hayslip in my own little world.
Ashe.
All right, so my call to action is to remember that you are the change that you are waiting for and that the revolution is now, right? And so I want to close with the Ellis Hayslip's comment that Black culture is world culture. Back to you, Etch.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone on this panel for taking the time to share your gifts with our community. A big thank you to our incredible audience for joining us and for participating in this discussion. We hope that you'll spread the word about the broadcast of Mr. Soul. Remember, airing this Monday at 10 p.m. And remember, you can also stream it on our website at vegaspbs.org until March 23rd. Please take a moment to complete our survey in the chat box. They let us know how we did and how we can improve this experience. We hope to see you at our next event for the screening of Coded Bias, a documentary about an MIT Media Lab researcher who discovers most facial recognition does not see dark-skinned faces or women with accuracy. She joins the fight to expose the threats to civil liberties posed by an increasingly data-driven automated world. So once again, thank you all, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.